So here we are, finally, I'd say, into a bunker, talking about algorithms. And I don't know if you guys have the chance today to give a thought about, I mean, what are we doing here, and what does it mean to be in a bunker talking about algorithms while at the same time a cloud of white smoke is popping out at the central pavilion where the collective show is happening. And then some question, of course, no answer came out because I think the work is extremely layered and very interesting. But some questions came in my mind, and I'd like to start sharing this question with you, and then we build from here. I mean, is the bunker? What is this bunker? Is this bunker a metaphor for a machine? Is this bunker a computational machine? And are we inside the belly of the beast? I mean, are we inside the computer? Are we, by any chance, the last humans being survived into the machine? And is it possible, while being inside this machine, to let's say, to change the shape of the machine, to change the shape of the bunker with our voices, the same way that wind is carving stones, the same way, for example, language, human language, is changing the morphology of vocal cords in relation to the phonetics of the language that each of us is talking. And what's the relation between the bunker, the heaviness, the concreteness, the underground nature of the bunker with the cloud? Are we sonifying the bunker, indeed the computational machine, and is the cloud outside respatializing our sound, our conversation? And isn't this something that has to do with the change of state in the way that physics talk about? So from the concreteness of cement to the ephemerality and to the ethereal nature of this cloud. And isn't the cloud itself indeed a metaphor for the computational cloud? So these were things that I was sort of having fun while waiting for you guys. And of course, the relation between the bunker and the cloud as well is maybe, or it can be read as the relation between hardware and software. And indeed, what about us humans interfacing these two dimensions, and indeed changing states between the two? And can we articulate these two dimensions in a political way? I mean, can we resist and can we use algorithm for political scope, aims? I mean, that's one of the things that interests me the most. I've been spending myself, strangely enough, for what I've been saying until now, I've been spending the last 10 years of my life doing sort of like nomadic work for around 10 years in some of the weirdest region of the world, during some of the most convoluted and bizarre and weird and dangerous events of recent history, from the revolution in Iran in 2009 to all over the Middle East during the Arab Spring, and and then in Fukushima during the nuclear disaster, and then umbrella revolution, standing grounds, and so on and so forth. And I've been trying to do this work because I do believe that was possible to use technologies and to approach these events, trying to use technology to enhance the political agencies of the people that were involved. And the practice itself has been a practice that's something similar to a performative approach to cinema, a cinema becoming a life form, if you want. And certainly also a form of video squatting, a sort of a way to squat places where usually it's not possible to use and record anything. And the concept of border, and that's why I've been spending a little time on this idea of borders, because also my practice is grounded into this practice base. But the idea of border and the idea of algorithms, I think that might be interesting to be taught together. I mean, aren't algorithms designing borders in the online space as much as borders offline are designing the structure of the world that we inhabit, in a way? And when I was studying, or when I was, performing borders, performing crisis zone, performing uprising, revolution, and so on, especially when it comes to border, I was very much interested in a specific zone, which is actually between country, indeed between borders. I mean, actually countries never border each other physically. There's always a pillow area, like a buffering zone that you have to cross. And then this zone is a zone where, technically speaking, there's no jurisdiction of a country's law over another. I mean, it's really a no-law land in a way, and that's why, at least that's how I see it. It's a gated, or it's a gated space. That's why you only transit, you don't stay, and that's why, of course, you are not supposed to do anything creative over there. I say this because the concept of conurbation, which is a concept coming from a French philosopher, Jean-François Lyotard, was a concept that, to me, was pointing at this buffering zone of borders. And my question, and I'm coming to the point that I'm trying to make, my point is it possible to find the buffering, where is the buffering zone of algorithms? Because I do believe that buffering zone as conurbation, for Jean-François Lyotard, conurbation was the moment in which, when you're tuning radio, it was, there is an anecdote. He was in California at that time, was traveling with a car. He couldn't tune, Lyotard couldn't tune his radio properly, and only noises were coming because he couldn't catch the right, radio wave. And conurbation was a way to talk about, to me at least, was a way to talk about borders in a liquid, amorphous way. And it was, in a way, an attempt to re-articulate the notion of borders in an emancipatory way, indeed not as something frozen and stiff. The same way that we are used to think about algorithms, right? Algorithms are used to datafying, to profile people. I mean, that's what we are constantly, violated, if you want. Where is the buffering zone of algorithm? That's one of the questions that I was trying to think about today. And is there a buffering zone for algorithm? And this idea of buffering zone and of conurbation then led me to approach also the relation between, and inevitably, the cloud hanging over the pavilion, the cloud of white smoke, led me to approach the issue of border and conurbation and of buffering zone in relation to the idea of breathing. I mean, isn't the cloud a manifestation of our conversation? And isn't our conversation eventually like a form of breathing, inevitably? And what's the relation between breathing and algorithms? I'm saying this because I'm working with Bifo on a movie project around the notion of breathing. His last book, just published last January, is called Breathing. And the attempt that Bifo does in his book is that of trying to think breathing, and indeed rhythm, I'm saying that because I know there's some musicians here, breathing and rhythm as a political category. I mean, and indeed, the idea is also that of looking at the history of social movements, and indeed the history of uprisings and revolution, as the attempt of, not to be technical, but of the general intellect to give itself a body. And giving itself a body means giving to itself a breath which is desynchronized from the mechanized or breathing coming out from what we decide to call in the conversation we had recently the iron lung, which is the algorithmic breathing, which is co-opting organic, if you want, breathing. It's a metaphor, obviously, but you see, I think it's a rich metaphor. And how is it possible to get rid of the iron lung of the computational abstract machine? Is it even possible? And is it possible to do so by highlighting and finding the buffering space between these algorithms, and can we tweak them, starting from this place, which I'm not sure even where it is located, and not even if it exists in a way. And that, a couple of other ideas, and then please, in any time, in any case, already from now, jump in if you feel like. One of the main issue, I think, here, I mean, in relation to some of these concepts I'm throwing here is the relation between algorithm and differences. I mean, I think personally, I do believe that the main problem with the way that algorithms are designed today is that algorithms are promoting identity and are based on the principle of identity instead of being based on the principle of differences, and instead of promoting differences, promoting diversification, promoting bifurcation, instead of, and we see this very well in the way that the database for artificial intelligence are built. I mean, Pasquinelli says that very well. I mean, it's statistical induction, it's averaging, it's really, I mean, it's algorithm against difference instead of algorithm to promote differences. I mean,
but do you think that every algorithm works like that? I mean, are you into categorizing algorithms just as those computer technology that make profiles of people on the internet for economical or political reasons? I mean, algorithms are pretty much everywhere. And the first note I would like to put forward is that you seems to create a difference between a human being and algorithms, which is, from my point of view, not entirely correct, because human beings have chemical biological algorithms that we call DNA and RNA. And that's a self-replicating algorithm, which is working well that created evolution from small cellular beings in the sea to the whole life you can see on Earth. It's all coming from the same algorithm who mutated many times and created diversification. So my first point to your pitch would be to say, are we different from algorithms, or we are indeed algorithms? Because I think that we are. And the fact that we create algorithms are basically the way we solve problems. Anything you want to solve to calculate some kind of data from a physical phenomena, you need algorithms to do the job, because of course you cannot handle all the numbers. And algorithms, of course, are there also to save your life on a daily basis. For example, nowadays, the technology with nuclear medicine use sophisticated algorithms that literally paintbrush tumors inside the brain with protons. And that's a huge deal of algorithms working. So is this just about bad algorithms? And what are bad algorithms? And why we are facing those algorithms? Before leaving the words to my colleague here, I will add that many of the topics that we are going to talk today are object of scientific research of the European Commission. And I'm talking about what they call the digital transformation. Sooner or later, we will face a world where everybody will have their DNA analyzed, and that's good because we will heal a lot of diseases, studying many DNAs from people. But of course, there could be also a downside on this, that we will be controlled by algorithms. For example, algorithms are used in jails in Europe and United States. Some algorithms says if you are a black man, there are some percent probabilities that you will reiterate the offense. And that's a biasing the algorithm. Another algorithm will say if a person lives in a certain point of a city, he will not get a loan because he probably lives in a black population area. So another example of biased algorithms. But algorithms are not just that. I mean, are not just Facebook and not just corporations or nations, because what we what we face in the future with digital transformation are two big paradigms. The first is Chinese, which is national control by algorithm. And the second one is American, which is corporation control by algorithms. In all these two big contradictions, there is no space for democracy at all. But again, there are good algorithms, and we are algorithms too. So where do we go now with this knowledge?
Yeah, I would expand because I wouldn't want to put an adjective of good or bad algorithms, but in fact I think yes, on one hand we are organisms, we have genes. Our genes are programmed to recreate themselves and expand, and they will do anything they can to do this. And this in a cellular way, they will push so that this happened in a bad or in a good way. It doesn't really matter. It goes beyond the concept of what we think is far away from the morality or ethics.
Yeah.
So to put it in a kind of a wider scope, algorithms are part of a system. Now, how we are developing and how we organically move within these systems is actually beyond this. Maybe one of the other topics that I read that was in the string and that is probably part of this cloud is polarization, and it's something when you were mentioning, Mitra, you were mentioning something about identity. And yes, when we talk about, let's say, just to pass the word, bad algorithms, is because for our concept, or at least for mine as an artist, is when I see Facebook or anything of the big corporations, Google, whatever, we are promoting a lot of identity. You are promoting identity in a period where borders seem to be not so liquid, but your identity is very liquefied. So you're not defined anymore so specifically by a function that could be your job, a family, your role in a family. Families are changing, the role is changing, the economies are changing, and the economies are changing worldwide. And actually algorithms are being used to as you were saying, for bias profiling, but you do this, for example, in airports. You can, to study the best way for somebody to buy something, there are algorithms that can tell you, put the coffee place on the right-hand side, 10 doors away from the next gate, because for sure, by the studying the way people move, you can make them do things. So if you put a publicity here, and to the left, and the coffee place to the right, everybody will go towards the coffee place. And nobody will see the publicity. And one would think, oh, that's against publicity because you're not publicizing. But in fact, it's working for the coffee place. And this is an algorithm that says, okay, you go in, you don't go left, you can go left or right. If you go left, you check my advertisement. If you go right, you go and buy coffee. If you go straight, you go and take your airplane. Problem solved. And that is to go back to what you were saying about algorithms are a way to solve problems. Now, many years ago, many artists and activists thought, yes, let's use these algorithms. Let's take computers and algorithms and power of processing data in places where this seems to be where there seems to be less of this capacity, especially in the southern parts of the world. And there was this big belief that we could actually make a huge change, and I think that for a large period of time this was happening. But I think then there was some sort of trauma or the polarization, so the fact that you have these big corporations dominating with these type of platforms or social media put not the algorithms, but this way of using internet or platforms for communicating. I think it pushed it to a way that we became also non-sensitive about it and less critic about it. I mean, I think everybody uses one of these big things here, like Facebook, I guess, no? And I don't use it, but it's Yeah. But it's, I see it more and more that if you're talking about the bad algorithm, this could be one of the bad ones. But why is it really bad? It's actually, it's a question. I'm not saying it's good.
I think this idea of like good and bad algorithms that you raised, it's really relevant to talk about because it's true that especially when it comes to critical digital media approaches, we are very much like we have in mind when we hear the word algorithm,
Yeah.
we have in mind, corporations mostly,
Yeah.
especially after Cambridge Analytica scandal and, you know, what Facebook has done and all this facial recognition that is happening right now, airport security, surveillance. So this is the reason why we are leaning towards like picturing the algorithm as something really bad. But as you rightly point out, we are also made of instructions, right? DNA, RNA are instructions that we have in our cells. That I guess the difference is though that we do have free will, and so it's a combination of like a preset a string of information which we have in our DNA, RNA, and a combination of this together with our free will. And I think the point of like agency is the really focal point that we do not see when it comes to algorithm, because the way in which we see algorithms usually is by removing any trace of agency from them. But in fact, the algorithms are designed by humans in the end. So it's a set of instruction that is configured and mastered by a human being. So in the end, there is free will in the design of the algorithm.
Oh, yes. And, well, there are many good algorithms that keeps you life safe every day, and you don't have any control on them. But you trust the people that do these algorithms. So it's a matter of trusting who and why. Whenever you talk about corporation algorithm, you must take in account the fact that first, these algorithms are patent protected. So there are laws protecting the secrecy of these algorithms. And the second is that because these are patent protected, there are a lot of lawyers that will fight to protect them and to keep them secret. But what happens if an algorithm of a corporation became so important and so vital to the life of society in the 21st century? What happens with this kind of algorithm? Because the point is that one can make a mistake. Okay, I can write an algorithm and I can make a mistake, a mathematical mistake, and then some people suffer for this. On the other way, I could be not very a good person. I could do some biasing because I'm racist, and so write an algorithm that punish black people in some way or another, and that's a different thing. So there are algorithms that are bad because not because they are intrinsically bad, but because they are badly programmed, because there are mistakes, and man makes mistakes every day. It's part of our way to learn. On the other hand, there are algorithms that are biased because there is a reason, a political reason, a sociological reason, an economical reason, of course. And one of the striking revelation I had this year working with European Commission is that they consider the great internet corporations are much powerful than nations. So we talk about borders many time in this year, talking about borders between nations. But the real problem is that we are not looking at the right direction, because nations are something that is not going to stay forever. We have a revolution happening right now, which is a non-space. It's not a physical space. It's a different kind of space, and still nobody has rules for this kind of space. So the problem with algorithms is control. Who controls the algorithm? who verifies the good or bad algorithm? Because many times algorithms saves our life.
Yeah, I'd like to raise a point on this very note that you are talking about, which is, okay, you talk about corporations like being more powerful than nations, which is probably the case. And you talk about space, so erasing borders. This situation is erasing borders, so probably the question that Misra has raised does no longer have any sense because
It has
borders.
some sense,
But
it's
yeah,
shifting.
I think what you are addressing is a question of legal borders, because the European Commission and not even the US Congress, as we have seen again in the case of Zuckerberg testimony, they are no longer able to impose rules on these big giants.
They don't
So, yeah. But I'd like to raise the issue that, okay, maybe there is no such a thing as a legal space to regulate these corporations. However, I would like to point out that we are talking about materiality in the end. I mean, algorithms, the fact that there is here a cloud that is steaming, it's a really important thing because it's hinting to the fact that even this discussion, like algorithms and code that seem to be transparent and not based in any place, in fact, they are based in warehouses. And most likely there are people like digital slaves or underpaid labor, most likely living in non-Western countries that are exploited by corporations in order to do digital work, right? And also, so there is labor. So this is a word that I would like to throw on the table because algorithm risks to be, as a word, too transparent, too light, too ideologically light, actually.
Yeah.
But I do think that we should point out the labor dimension, the materiality of this corporation, the fact that there is, not just people working for example, for content moderation that we tend to erase. We tend to get these people out of the picture, and we tend to highlight just the role that algorithms have when it comes to content moderation. But in fact, there are real people, underpaid people that do work in content moderation. But also the fact that this the cloud is based somewhere. It's not really a cloud that exists in the sky. It exists most likely in a place that has been disrupted when it comes to environment. So this cloud is actually generating a catastrophe when it comes to our planet. So I would like to juxtapose the word algorithm with the word labor and materiality.
Yeah, and I would add that you're talking very rightfully about the cloud, that the talk we are doing now is in a bunker. We're in a bunker, and it wasn't many years ago that I think this thing was conceived. I mean, there are still wars happening in all the world, and I think this is the real materiality. There could be a time where we could be speaking by ourselves without a microphone and not being streamed, and we would just be here, and this is to get back to the point that Mitra was saying at the beginning. This is a heavy materiality. This is a condition where we are closed in this space, talking, and it could be, ideally, in a moment where there is nothing else outside. Plus, I have worked as an information technology manager, apart from being an artist, for something like 18, 20 years, or maybe more, I don't know, I forgot how old I am. And I was once in a place where the whole data warehouse burnt, and all the data of two very big companies was lost. And these two very big companies, which I will not say the name, one of them just disappeared, just because they did not have any more all their client and customer information. And this is well, that was something that shows how physical this immaterial world is. And it goes back to the labor, because what was happening that in India, this data warehouse got burnt. And that was in India with people working shifts of 24 hours, which is highly illegal for any type of world. And yes, there were no economical borders. There is a border in India, even if at the moment it's kind of flimsy.
Right. There was also recently out in the news talking about this loss of data, because we do consider data as being immaterial, but recently was out in the news, so I will mention the company, MySpace, that now it's kind of like old-fashioned social network or almost like forgotten. But recently, I mean, there was a time where MySpace was the Facebook, so it was like really important. And many musicians, and you are artists, so you know this, have invested, like have uploaded their artwork on MySpace. And recently, MySpace lost 10 years of data, because there was a physical damage, and they didn't have a backup. So I think it's important, and I like the fact that we are talking from a bunker, because in the end, this reminds us of the very condition of materiality, and it's freezing also.
Yes, but the paradigm of data storage is totally different right now. I mean, the big data are, I don't know if you know about something about big data, but big data is not stored anymore in that way. We have multiple copies of database all over the world in different spaces. And that's how it works. It's a huge space that can grow infinitely. And it's based on multiple copies. So, and regarding labor, for sure, nowadays we have problem of slave laborers, also in technology, especially in production of technology, not much like in the production of data, but in the production of physical objects like cellular phones and computers, of course. But a great deal of the jobs which have to do with database will be all computerized pretty much soon, because artificial intelligence will wipe out millions of jobs. And so slave labor is just momentary.
Yeah, but this is problematic. I work on Syria mostly, and recently, actually today, there was an article on the Atlantic that was addressing the fact that many Syrian activists, I'm pretty sure that you know that Syria is the most YouTubeized conflict in the world, and people have died or have faced jail in order to document the conflict in a visual way, in order to produce evidence, right? So what happened is that most of the corporations, like the platforms where this visual data was stored by activists, have been, most of the data has been removed, not most, but many data, which is digital evidence, has disappeared. And so many people who could be held accountable for war crimes and violations of human rights can no longer be accountable, because when algorithms are taking a decision, so this is like how I connect to your point. Yes, it's true that artificial intelligence is taking over humans. So it's true that a lot of algorithms now are doing the work that used to be done by digital unpaid, or so not unpaid, but underpaid labor. However, this is problematic because algorithms and artificial intelligence do not understand context as much as humans, And sometimes we do need humans to understand the situation. So sometimes they would flag a content as violent just because, there's something in the metadata that is telling them that it's violent. But how about, people understanding the context, understanding the reason why people, for example, do upload destruction, blood, and death for the sake of holding people accountable. So I think the understanding of the context is quite relevant when it comes to crisis zone, and cannot be delegated.
But I think that you are underestimating the computing power of today. I mean, what is happening in Syria is a very special case in which we have multiple nations fighting. So there are many secret services working there. And I'm pretty sure that nobody makes a mistake there. They did it on purpose, and they use algorithms just to hide behind algorithms. But those crime scenes are wiped out from the database because somebody wants to. And remember, you have multiple nations which are big, big, big empires, I mean, Russia and United States, and not just them, which are fighting each other right there. And so I really doubt that there are mistakes from algorithms, but these things are done proposed with intention. And regarding the fact that machines cannot see the context, I'm not sure anymore about this, because artificial intelligence nowadays is pretty complicated and very sophisticated. There are engines for semantic computing, so computers can understand languages and words in context, in any context, in a perfect way. And I know that there are research going on in the United States where they analyzed. I think that they are doing the same in Europe. But anyway, in the United States, they analyzed all the 400 million tweets every day, and they can understand everything. The computer can understand everything because they are semantic computers.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I'll try to sort of like, bring some of these ideas. It's interesting, I think, because we might have some differences in our position, which is great for the conversation. And but then I want really to address some of the things that made me think and also a little bothered me. I mean, starting back from this idea of the good-bad algorithms. I mean, obviously, to me, they're not neither good or bad. I mean, actually, they're both at the same time, and that's what's been defined by back in the days by Plato with the notion of pharmaca, and technology is pharmaca, which means it's both poison and cure. So there's nothing. I mean, I want to point out that because I might be misunderstood or pushed towards a corner which I'm not really belonging to. I'm not a primitivist. I'm not against algorithms at all. I mean, I want algorithms. I need algorithms to move in Venice with my Google Maps. Otherwise, I get lost every 3 seconds, even with Google Maps. Imagine without. So, absolutely, we need algorithms, and it's about I think use value, and of algorithms, and then of course in relation to the data bias and in relation to working and labor condition, which is also important to remind that algorithms are also operating not only on the cloud but on the materiality of working condition, for example. But I want to say indeed then that if this is true at the same time, I'm a little worried by the easiness with which we are associating human being to algorithms. I mean, no, I don't believe so. I mean, I don't think human beings or anything organic is an algorithm, although there might be something similar to an algorithm, which is like a string of in the case of DNA, of letters, and then I argument the point. Then let's have a conversation about this, because I think and then okay, maybe it's not algorithms. Let's say they are ecorhythms, right? And then they call it ecorhythms because they're algorithms that are somehow connected to an ecosystem. But then the real difference. I mean, I'm specifically focusing on point of view in my research, and I'm actually doing a throughout research in relation to the differences between phenomenological organic understanding of the notion of point of view and orientation, and what happened to this notion when it becomes machinic, when it becomes cinematic, and what happened to this notion when it becomes algorithmic. What's the meaning of an algorithmic point of view, and what's the difference between an algorithmic point of view as the one, for example, which is I guess the state of art of a generative adversarial network, which is really based on the idea of trying to replicate the phenomenological functioning of organic point of view. Okay, you have 2 point of views. There is a dialogue, if you want, metaphorically speaking, between point of views sharing images, and then one say, yes, this is the real image, and one is keep proposing images. So it's really the structure, the architecture of generative adversarial network is really based, if you want, on a notion, on a phenomenological notion, understanding of point of view and of subjectivity and indeed of human being. But yet there is a difference. And the difference to me it's a different in quality. It's not in quantity, and that's why also I don't believe that we can read everything. I mean, by going through 40 million tweets a day, and then we have perfectly clear. Otherwise, novelty wouldn't happen, and that's why the algorithmic reference to the DNA it's partially true, not to say maybe false a bit, because what happened with DNA is that DNA produces differences. Besides the fact that there is the mystery of consciousness, obviously.
That's
I mean,
a part of the algorithm. The difference is a part of the algorithm because the DNA is just a long string of instructions. Those instructions create proteins, and the proteins have different functions in your body. And the DNA has also many other similarities to computer programming because it has redundancy codes to correct itself. It works indeed like a digital information. And we must recognize that it's an operating system. It's a self-made operating system. It's a self-evolved from biology, but it's an operating system. It works in many, many ways like computers. And I mean, I've studied machine language. I mean, to program beat by beat computers. And then I studied DNA. And there are so striking similarities that you would think that there is a connection, but there isn't. The fact is that both systems are logical. They function, they work, and they and the DNA evolved in billions of years in the way it is now. It's difficult for me not to see that the human machine is an algorithm.
But you remember back then, I mean...
of course,
do you remember
hold on, my last
yeah,
sentence.
of course.
You have to, when you talk about DNA, you have also to take in account all the other things that makes a human being, because the DNA is just the operating system. What you feel inside the operating system, what you put inside your computer is just your experience, and that's epigenetics. And that's all the your history, your family, your friends, your language, your land, everything. Of course, a copy of myself in the DNA format is just a copy of my operating system, not of me.
Yeah, and the copy itself is never precise, right? And always failing in a way because of epigenetics, because of experience, because of the umwelt, and so on and so forth, right?
But the DNA itself works as a multiple layer algorithm. It's a very sophisticated one, but the way we produce enzymes and proteins, the way that we produce genes, the way that we evolve, it's all inside the code. It's all made to make us evolve. So this is why I think that it's impossible to detach ourselves from the algorithm, because we are doing exactly what we are programmed for. We are programmed to create life. And because we are intelligent and we are the only species on this planet that can think about life and the universe and create science, create art, we are meant in some ways or another to use our technology to evolve ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, only thing. I mean, the computational metaphor, obviously, and that's, I mean, very common and inevitably this time. But I mean, then I wouldn't be concerned by the fact that in the previous historical epoch we were comparing human being to a vapor machine, una macchina a vapore, and then back then the metaphor, which was perfectly functioning for the function of the body, was the vapor machine, because back then was industrialization, and then everybody was convinced, yes, we work like vapor machine, and now we,
But you should not confuse a metaphor with scientific data.
Right, but then it's even more scary, because then what you're saying is that you are scientifically convinced that we as humans are algorithms, and which because this means not considering the free will, and so most importantly means not considering the presence of the body. Wait, the presence of the body, I think, because
no, of course the free will it's there, and the body is there.
Yeah, but the free will is not coded, Habibi. That's the
do
strange things.
Do you have any kind of free will if you in your genes there is Alzheimer's gene? No, you don't have any kind of free will.
No, but in fact, the free will is an emergent properties that made us different from algorithms. And this may be happening And I want to introduce the topic maybe of the body, because also you mentioned this thing of the. I'm very interested between. I'm not.
I think you're both going to a level which is very simplistic. No, I don't want to offend anyone, but you're forgetting the context. You're forgetting that we are multiple systems interacting with another system, and we are within other systems that have other type of relationships. And we are in, let's say, this type of systems where are rhizomic. So there are multiple inputs and multiple outputs of which we have not yet calculated or even seen what they are, what it is. In nuclear physics, we are studying nuclear physics. We know up to a certain point, and we maybe know a little bit more about the astrophysics or cosmology. We are starting to know. We are in 1% or 0.000 something percent of what we could actually start to define. So we are, I think, in this type of conversation, we're mixing. We are trying to define something that is really not definable, and at the same time, there is a mix between human beings. If we want to define what a human being is, it's a complex machine, it's a complex system which interacts with other human beings and other forms of life and the universe. Now, starting from there, why is it important that we emphasize on the algorithmic part of what this machine is, of what the human being is? And this is maybe what you were trying to, when you at the beginning you said, why are we here talking about algorithms? I think it's both interesting to understand that yes, there is an organic part of ourselves which is done, is coded, and is in this way. And then the world that we are creating, because we do create life, we create our own life, and we cognitively, we are projecting something that is probably coming from within ourselves. So in this I kind of agree with San Cristoforo when he says, yeah, we are kind of coded to do this. Then, I don't know if it's free will, I don't know what it is, but I am very fond of any type of error. Because
exactly, Matthias. But then, if we're focusing on the error part, that might be also an interesting
yes.
point. Then it's when the malfunctioning of whatever you're trying to call algorithm, which to me is not, is where evolution happened. I mean, it's based on the dysfunction of the algorithm.
No, I'm just.
Which is what you don't want algorithm to do. You know, like you don't want algorithm to fail, right? I mean, DNA works when it fails. Paradoxically, like when it fails, you have evolution because you have a bifurcation, which is unexpected, which is not coded because it's appearing in the relation with and so on and so forth.
But that's what I'm saying. I'm not trying to define what it is. I'm just saying I'm not trying to define if we are an algorithm. I think we are. Buckminster Fuller used to say we are verbs. And we are not verbs, because a verb has a time in it, and it's an evolution. It's an evolution by itself, by definition. So we are something which is in continuous change and is changing and is modifying, and we don't have the possibility, or we have a certain extent of possibility to predict what our evolution will be. Now, something which is very interesting that comes from algorithms, we were talking about machines, machine learning code, and somebody mentioned artificial intelligence, is that we are in that point where we have to kind of decide. Like when you build a train derails, a train has 42 seats by wagon, something like, 80 people could die. So do we build the train? When we have an airplane, 180 people can die. What is the error of that plane? That if it crashes, 180 people die. Then what is the error of the atomic bomb? So we're always facing this, what is the error or l'accident of this machine we're building? Is the constant thing a scientist has to face. Now we are programming machines to be able to program themselves. So we are creating lives that will actually be able to do their own thing, possibly. And Stephen Hawking was very against it.
Pessimistic,
and said, pessimistic. He said in a few years we're gone, because we are very problematic anyhow as human beings. We are problematic in a one-to-one relationship.
Yeah, we don't have
logical. we are irrational, illogical. I mean, we do create problems that if you are a set of algorithms and you want to resolve a problem,
Get rid of the human.
I would do that. I mean,
We do create life, we do create death also.
Yeah,
I
of
mean,
course.
it's not that we do create life only. And also, I think it's deeply, ideological what you're saying, because when you say that we are designed in a certain way, and so.
I didn't want to say we are designed.
But it looks like we are designed to produce this kind of technology, whereas we could create life by doing something else, right? So this is a historically determined direction that we are choosing now because of certain circumstances. So the fact that we are tended in the leaning towards thinking that this is the way we should evolve, it's ideological. This is not the only way we can evolve. There are so many other ways.
Well,
I want
we are
to...
doing it with technology. We are doing it with technology.
Yeah,
There's
but we
no
could do
way
something
around.
else. It's not like naturally, ontologically determined that we as humans, we design technology and we do algorithmic stuff, right? We could have done, we could do agriculture, we could do poetry, we could do something else. But so
Yeah,
the
but
fact
it's
that
always technology.
I think, no,
for
I
sure,
think
I
that
agree,
the
It's always technology,
emphasis.
Donatello, right? The relation is the relation between human and technology, right? The issue. And then you can use technology in different ways. And she has a incredible experience in the Middle East, like as I did. And you see people using technology in an extremely emancipatory way. I mean, right? So we are not really against technology, right? We're trying to define. I mean, I think the point is it's entropy. I would like to introduce the topic of entropy because then the difference between human-generated algorithms and biological algorithms, in a way. And if you follow the idea of Schrödinger, I mean, I jump into this a bit like physics and stuff.
I don't want to be the cat.
No, nobody want to be the cat, right? And then,
Especially because we're closed in here. So if that is the whole thing, just let me out.
Before, right? Before somebody can come
in
and
whatever
ask,
state I am
is
in,
the
I
cat
just want
dead
to go out.
or alive. But biological algorithms, DNA, according to Schrödinger in this tiny book, What is Life? I mean, they're anti-entropic. They resist entropy. So biology, organisms, they resist entropy. Why? Because they create structures. Fairly stable structure that can that's the paradox, and it's not well articulated in the book yet, and that's the work we are doing in France with Bernard Stiegler right now. The fact that an organism, you are as a biology, you are a structure, an ordered structure that resists entropy up to a certain degree, but to resist entropy and keep your order, well, you create a little entropy outside. At the same time, algorithmic technology is straightforwardly increasing entropy, not because it's bad, because technology is pharmaca. It can be also very good. I mean, so the problem is a context, if you want, is a political issue. I mean, I don't think nobody here is against algorithm. The opposite. It's about use value again.
I don't understand the difference here. I mean, what do you mean that technology is producing entropy and human beings resist entropy?
Yeah, I mean, not only human beings, I mean, everything organic, everything biologically alive, according to Schrödinger and many others, and especially Bernard Stiegler these days, biological organisms are ordered structure, and to keep ordered is a form of resistance to entropy, while entropy is obviously an excess of a generation of disorder. I mean, the paradox is that this biological form of life, and especially when it comes to human being, and especially because of the use of technology, to keep our entropy, we are increasing, to keep our anti-entropy, or to resist entropy, we are increasing entropy outside, and we are right now accelerating entropy. And why? Because we are using technology in a not wise way. I mean, why? There would be ways, and we have seen these ways. I mean, we have seen these ways in revolutionary contexts. We have seen people using algorithmic technologies, using the internet, uploading images during uprisings and revolution, and magically turning these technologies into something like that we're enhancing and political agency in that sense, if you want, reducing in that sense, like if you want the entropy of the soul, I mean, in that sense. But I mean, the issue of locality as well, in this sense, and the context and the labor that the topic that you come with also, it's fundamental. And that's also one of the issues. I mean, algorithms are not localized in a way. A biological organism is always localized. And this localized means it's part of a niche, or Umwelt, if you want, ecological niche, which is connected and shared with other animals that are approaching the same space from a different niche. and they are interfering with each other, but yet they live a separate space. I mean, algorithms, they don't have that, and why? Because they lack body, obviously. But our algorithm is one of the main issues right now, and I want to throw this, and maybe try to decline it from the point of view of your practices, if you want, because I think one of the most important topics these days is the topic of locality. Again, we are working on this issue in relation to entropy and algorithms in Paris a lot at the moment. And the issue of locality and algorithms is well, the issue of locality itself is why locality is conceived as a fascist concept these days. I mean, why? Because it's based on the idea of national, an idea of identity politics based on territory and the language, for example, right? Well, locality as such, if you look at biology again, and if you look at sharing ecological niche and finding a metastable equilibrium between organisms and so on, well, it's exactly the opposite in a way. I mean, locality, and how is it possible indeed to reinvent locality in an emancipatory way, and how is it possible to, because locality right now is not only biological, and especially when it comes to human being, biological human being locality is matched and doubled by an algorithmic locality. And that's very clear when it comes to data profiling, then the data selfie, if you want, or point of view data double, the way I call them, are a digital algorithmic form of a biological human-based form of locality, which happen around the concept of identity instead of the concept of difference, which is at the base of biological locality. Biological locality exists because it's based on difference and bifurcation. Otherwise, that's why there is Anthropocene right now,
not
right?
Because it's
local.
It's universal.
Sorry?
It's universal. It's not local.
Which one?
Like
Diversification. Yeah.
diversification of life is universal. It's not local.
No, it's universal. If you want universal, I'm not quite sure again. But that's maybe
On Earth.
Well, on Earth, but I mean, the biosphere itself is a locality, and within
All
the
right.
macrosphere of the biosphere as a locality, you have like a smaller.
You would say that
sphere
also
of
that
locality.
Facebook is a locality.
Yes, but then you see Facebook is a locality based on the principle of identity, while the biosphere is a locality based on the principle of difference. And that's why we are using algorithms and increasing entropy instead of reducing it, because we are using them, not mimicking what biology does, which in a way I would say that's what you would like, or it seems to push towards, which is, I guess, it's interesting, and I would go for that in a way. And but how do you see the issue of locality? I mean, you've been seeing technology used locally and with the good results. I mean, do you feel like saying anything about that, for example?
But I mean, I'd like to go back to politics, to be honest, because I think we are going too much.
Can I say just
yeah.
one thing then, which
Yeah.
is very abstract again.
Before I go into
yeah,
politics,
I just
okay?
did
Sorry,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, because the locality, and you were saying, okay, Facebook is about identity, but anything which is on the web is, for me, and I've done this through the practice of my work and my art, is that this is the space-time concept. We were used to a linear concept of time. We are now in a phase where we are understanding this space-time as a concept, as a different way of understanding what are time and our space together. So this issue of locality is very interesting because, as he was saying, yeah, Facebook is probably a local, you have your local profile, it's a local profile, it's your profile which is everywhere and it is at any time. But your body is not. Your body
Sure.
is held in a physical place, and your particles are united together, even if they are, every day you have other type of space particles going through your body. So in the same way, you are your border, and at the same time you are not. Your particles create some sort of border. Anyhow, that is going too
Your
far away.
electric fields.
Yeah, but this sense of what is local, what is global, what is at the same time, this is very interesting because this is what is what we were trying to talk about, algorithms, good algorithms, and all that we said. And to go back to the politics, yes, local. I think anything which is local is we have to define what is local, but in a very broad sense, I think it's a treasure nowadays. To have anything that you can define as local, you can treasure it. If you're able to define what is of this place we are here now, what is local of where we are now, what we can bring to show to some, it's a kind of a treasure, and this is diversity. This diversity is a treasure because it's not based on a general form of identity. Let's put it this way.
Right, but then I leave you the word, but then insisting on this. Yeah, please.
No,
finish.
go on.
No, because then, I totally agree, and that's my point. But isn't I mean, aren't we facing the fact that this beautiful idea of locality as diversity and as a treasure to keep, to preserve, to enhance even more and produce more diversity is totally co-opted by the right, by fascism, and is turned into a conservative idea of locality based on identity and nationalism and so on and so forth.
I absolutely
and
agree.
the question is, how can we turn it back into this beautiful idea of diversity, which is where it's originally belonging?
I absolutely agree, but because we were talking in specific about the algorithm and we went into this, for example, we were talking before, people don't read. We said it, that very few people read books. Don't remember we said it here or outside because my sense of space-time is very weird.
That was outside, the traghetto, by the water.
Okay, so it's a nicer place.
Nicer, yes.
Yeah, so for example, people don't read. What do you do when people don't read? You can't force them to read, but what I do is publish books. Because I think people don't read, you need books, because it's easy. It's a very small algorithm, this one. But then I need to distribute the books. I need to make them available. Other forms of... but I try to do them in this way. Bottom up, local places. I identify these localities based on many different things, which is the connection and the relationships that you get through different types of identities. So through different type of people. And I think that is politically per se, that is a political act, to be able to produce and to show whatever you want to show. Then another thing I wanted to say, for example, I was once, I don't remember the photographer I was talking to, and I've worked a lot with in Israel and Palestine, not being there, but I haven't been there, but I've worked many years with things related to it. And at a certain point, a Roman photographer told me, I'm kind of tired of seeing people dead and showing dead people, because death is no longer anything. You see it everywhere. The spectacle has taken Thanatos, made it a spectacle, and it's so obvious that nobody really gives a shit.
That's what Susan Sontag said.
Yeah. And in fact, it was he was quoting he was quoting Susan Sontag, and it's actually in the photography book. But one photo is better than 1,000 gigabytes of video sometimes. But sometimes 1,000 gigabytes of video can make a difference.
Oh, yeah.
And not because of so much about what it's the real content. It's more about like you. I think this is what your practice is.
The video squatting, if you want, squatting and taking space,
taking space for a certain amount of time, that can be so disruptive. And it really doesn't matter how good the video is. It's more about having this disruption, and it's interfering in this line, in this space-time. So
and creating a buffering, if you want, right?
Yes.
Creating a
so
space
so
of,
you're creating your autonomous zone for one moment. You're breaking the space-time in that moment, and you're making your own local space-time, which is by default a disruption. Because nowadays, if you disrupt what is a script, because, I mean, like you were saying, the governments, this is all, I mean, all the secret service, if you break the script, if you break their script, it's not true. I don't believe that we are doomed, that we will be always governed by terrible governments and bad people. Because if I did think like this, I would probably leave for another planet. So sorry.
If you can find an exit.
Yeah,
exactly. Good.
That was the bad people want to do anyway. The bad people themselves, they're planning this because they know.
I know.
Because they're
clever and they have money. So
No, going back to politics, because I like the fact that we maybe end up on a political note. I don't know. You decide. I don't want to suggest that I am the last one. I just want to throw the word politics on the table because, of course, a discussion about algorithms is definitely a political discussion, very much. Also because we are talking about locality, local, global. And because I worked in the Middle East for many years, and I had the chance to witness 2011, which I would like to remind that was a very lucky, blessed moment in which the local intersected, in fact, and connected to the global. I mean, there were uprisings pretty much everywhere in the world. So maybe you remember 2011 as the year of the Arab Spring, but this is not just the Arab Spring. There was like Occupy Wall Street, Indignados, Greece, Italy, everywhere. There was a moment in which politics was really global. I was acted local in different places, such as from Syria to Greece, but also there was this connection that was created also because of social networks and because of technology. So I think that back in 2011, what we saw was this political use of technology, and I think that unfortunately the Arab Spring did function as a laboratory for power to study the use of technology.
Absolutely.
And this is really the problem. Like with the restrictions that we have today, 2011 could not happen. And this is what we should think about, because since then there has been a backlash from political powers, from corporations, because they saw that people were using technology to make a change. And after that, a set of restrictions were implemented in order not to make another 2011 happen.
Can I make a question to you? I totally agree with you with this. But I would like to make the devil's advocate for 1 second.
Sure.
What makes you think that those spontaneous revolutions were not instead engineered with the use of technology? Because that's the work of the devil. I mean, to make people believe that something doesn't exist.
Okay, right. My practice, I am an ethnographer, so I don't talk about theory. I study the field, and I used to live in the Middle East, and I do speak Arabic, and I lived in the region for many years. So I am blessed enough to understand that the Arab people have an agency, and not just because I was there occasionally. I mean, I spent 15 years of my life there. So I do think that what happened in the Middle East is the result of a very slow process that is historically determined after Sykes-Picot. So, I mean, we're talking about decades and decades. So, no, I don't believe in conspiracy theory. I don't believe that Facebook,
I didn't want
came all of a sudden.
I didn't want to make a conspiracy. I'm just telling you that if I see some, look at Syria. If you have some people that is against the tyrant, and you, in some ways, use technology to facilitate an uprising of the people. I'm not telling you that this is totally engineered from scratch. I'm telling you that there is always a faction that doesn't like the tyrant, the president, the king, whatever. You take the useful bunch of people which is against this, and then you facilitate with technology some kind of uprising. And I'm not talking about Middle East because I'm not an expert at all, but for example, we have many others engineered coup d'etat all over the world in the last 70 years. So what my fear is that in some ways technology could be used the way you told. People connecting and be active and organizing themselves against injustice and whatever. But what if we underestimate the fact that technology is not in the hands of people, really, but it is in the hands of corporations and nations which have top-level access to this technology that could be used in ways that we don't totally understand. I mean, are you taking in consideration this?
Of course, this is actually my point. My point is that right now, 2011 could not happen because the restrictions have become crazy. The restriction being put on technology by the corporations themselves and by governments are not the same that we had in 2011. In 2011, the situation was much more open. There were more flows that
It was not
unfortunately
regulated at all.
it was not regulated exactly.
But what is telling you that? I mean, we are regulating the internet right
Yes,
now.
definitely. I mean, we are talking about 8 years after.
What is, in your opinion, the reason behind this regulation? And the question is sincere. It's not provocative, because in some ways I believe that probably we want more control. They want more control. Somebody wants, who has power wants control, of course. But on the other way, they probably are also doing this to protect, because what do you know about another nation putting the fingers inside the social life of another nation to change the political life of this nation or whatever? I mean, look at the United States and America and China fight themselves in cyberspace every fucking day.
Right.
And they are tackling inside the politics of the other nations, doing this every day. So the regulations probably are there not just only because who has power wants total power over people, but they are probably trying to protect the citizens from other nations.
I think the powers that be are trying to protect the powers that be. So they are trying to protect the status quo. For me, 2011 was a way to hint at the fact that technology can be used for political change. When this is restricted to a region that has been disrupted for years and the object of colonial powers fights, such as the Middle East, then it's fine. In fact, if you go back to 2011, the narrative which you find in Western media is that, oh, this is the Arab Spring, it's amazing, and people
the
are...
Facebook revolution.
Yeah, the Facebook... So why there was these ideological readings? Because, of course, it's in the interests of our so-called democracies that a place such as the Middle East liberates itself without blood and without us sending tanks and, bombs and whatever. But after they saw that, change, especially change in a region that has been so much under control, needs time and needs, unfortunately, blood, and also does generate violence, and also touches this political change that was in the making in 2011, also touched neo-colonial interest, then there was a backlash. So, of course, now the situation is, Middle East was used as a laboratory to implement control and surveillance on technology, because it was fine when technology was liberating the Middle East, but it's no longer fine when technology is used for political change in here. And so the more conservative regimes fear that technology can give too much power to citizens and put corporations, for example, at risk.
That's totally legit, and I understand it, and I agree. But my question is another one then. What makes you think that people is always on the right side?
Oh no, that's for sure not the case. But
I mean, we know that the worst
right.
scenarios
but,
in Europe.
What makes you think that Zuckerberg
no.
knows how to regulate us, or China, or
he isn't
right?
able. As a matter of fact, he went. I don't know if you saw the interview he gave at the European Commission, but it was really put in a bad situation,
right.
because the European Commission has enough of this, and they call them bandits, and there is a reason, because these people sell data for really nasty reasons, which are totally political. I mean, Facebook is a political medium. We know it, and we cannot deny it. It's used by the United States for political reasons, and that's why China doesn't have Facebook, and that's why Russia doesn't have Facebook, because they know it's a political instrument. And the fact that the European Commission put a lot of pressure on Facebook and all the others, I don't believe it is to create a state of control where we no longer have free speech. But we have to be very careful, because this is a new kind of power we are facing for the first time, because until the 1900s, the power was the typical power of kings with armies, okay? Nowadays, you don't need an army. You need very good programmers and very good servers and very good service to people. So I'm not sure that every time that people uprise is right. Sometimes people make very stupid choices. I mean, Nazi Germany was totally created by people. People elected Hitler. It was not a coup d'état. It was it was not engineered by anybody. It was. You not agree with that?
Goebbels wrote some pretty interesting things on how he engineered the whole.
Well, they were great marketing engineers. But guys, I mean, the anti-Semitism was there much way before than Hitler. It was there since Lutero.
Or gays, or that's kind of
even
course.
Goethe was anti-Semite, so it was there, and people elected him. So I do not trust always the people, because people makes wrong choices based on the belly. And
unfortunately, the controllers are in democracies elected by the people. So I think this is a question of like the hen and the egg, you know, who elected the politicians? Us.
I have an interesting question for you and for you guys, and then you can go on this way. For me, I have the sense that democracy is in a huge crisis. And maybe, I hope not, but I think that it will be replaced by something else, which is not dictatorship, because it will be not persons giving orders, but it will be machines giving orders. And I tell you, again, the point is that we have to choose between the Chinese and the Americans, but the result is just like the same. It's just a different face, but the way, I mean, the Chinese have this incredible technology of face recognition and whatever, and I don't know if you know it, but the Chinese are sequencing all the DNA of the people. They sequence one full genome every 10 minutes. And they have the biggest genetic laboratories in the world, all right? And they are doing this for many reasons. One reason is that if you know all the genetic codes, you could heal many different diseases, and pretty efficiently. But on the other side, you have total control. Of course, you don't have anymore any kind of privacy, whatever. But the technology was not invented by the Chinese. The face recognition, the algorithms, the DNA, it was all US made. So we cannot fall in the joke that believing that we have the good guys and the bad guys. They are both bad, and they have immense power. Only that we don't know exactly who has the power in the West.
But this is why I think you should not see it as a binary choice, whether the China model or US.
That's
I mean,
why
we
Europe
as European,
exactly.
You're talking about the European Commission, so let's wake up, us, you know.
Absolutely, yes.
Because this can be the third way.
Exactly. That's why Europe is so important. That's why nobody talks about Europe in a realistic way in newspapers and magazines. They don't tell what the Europe does for you, what are the researches they do, what they do to protect you. Because the real thing is that we are facing huge empires, India, China, United States, Russia, and Europe is just in the middle. And if we split in many states governed by local fanaticism, we ended up crushed. Totally.
Yes, this is the real
issue. A
issue.
huge Europe, absolutely, I believe.
Stronger.
Stronger,
But this is the reason why also there is like, and in this I believe you're right when you talk about orchestrating something. that the fact that Brexit thing, like this is
Come on, the
definitely
Brexit was
algorithmic
definitely-
led, yes, because there is an interest from
In
other,
splitting- exactly.
yes, in having a divided Europe. That's
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
Because they want us out of the game, but because we could propose a third model between those two models.
You remember maybe some American officials say, "Fuck Europe." I mean, they want Europe out. Americans, let's be clear. United States wants Europe split. And Russia could be interested in the same. Because if we are split, they can do whatever they want. And they will do it with algorithms, of course.
Exactly. As much as this sort of like campanilism and nationalism and identity politics is built through algorithms, at the same time, we're not that much aware in Europe, I guess, right? Because right now we're focusing very much on, okay, fascism is rising again.
Exactly.
And
But
the xenophobic, and then we forget that, well, this is produced by technology up to a certain degree, into echo chambers and filter bubbles and stuff like that, right? I mean,
and there is, if you look at newspapers and TV news lines, nobody talks about Europe in a good way.
Yeah.
They always talk about Europe when it's about problems, not about what Europe does. Not a word. Do you know that one of the biggest scientific research centers of European Commission is 60 kilometers from Milan on Lake Maggiore? Nobody does. Do you know that it has, well, except you probably, nobody knows it has 2 nuclear power stations and 1 cyclotron and 1,600 scientists and 33 kilometers of streets and 400 laboratories. Nobody knows this. Why? Because the media are not interested in talking about Europe. They say, well, there are specialized magazines about Europe.
It's boring.
It's boring. And this is killing Europe because people don't know anything about it. They are trying to cure cancer.
It's not very spectacular, Europe. It's very... And
I think
so polarized.
it's politicians use Europe, national politicians use Europe to get votes because the Europe is seen as this stranger commanding in your home. Like the Starks are going to command the Lannister or something like that.
Yeah.
Instead, the 7 kingdoms altogether makes real power, not just one commanding the others. The problem is that we have this deficiency of communication in Europe, which is tearing apart Europe. Brexit was totally engineered.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, guys, can I ask you after this overview somehow? I mean, or this flux of consciousness, I would say. I didn't have the chance. I would like to understand a little. How do you guys use algorithms? Because I have the impression that you guys really working like physically, if it makes sense to say that. How do you, in light of what we just thought about, how do you work with algorithms? I would be happy to know because we just met. I mean, we didn't know each other, so.
Well, I'm feeling really bad now that I use them.
No, because I am sure that you use them in a good way, right? And so I want to know how. I mean, eventually your practice.
Let's say I use them for. I'm also a programmer, so I use them to create programs, and I do generative music and algorithmic composition. So that's electronic music, and I actually. My aim usually when I use algorithms in music is to, let's say you can create a pool of variables, and these variables that you have in an algorithm are part of the instructions you give. So you would give an instructions to say, for example, then we are using some microphones now, pick up this sound, put it through a chain of events that I want, and then I could introduce, for example, multiple variables that come from something else, and that would change the sound. And because I'm interested in creating this moment of something I do not know and I do not expect. And it's either an error, it could be an error, then the system could crash, and it's okay, good, it's good for me. The system can react in can have many outputs. And another way I use algorithms is to take data which is not relevant to the music, not relevant to sound, and to transform it and see how I can work with this type of data. For example, I'm doing this with some data which is relevant to the cosmology before. So, for example, take a planet's eccentricity, which is how it revolves in its axis, or, for example, how far it is from the moon, from the sun in our galaxy, or how it relates to other planets. That data to transform it in numbers that change a type of sound that I'm doing. I have actually one installation which is ideally infinite until there is electricity going on, but it's ideally infinite because the music that it produces are very simple oscillators. It's inside a cabin, and it takes the data from the stars, planets, and the everyday time of Earth and the rotation of Earth. So it's basically creating you can hear sounds that will be different every time you go there to visit this place. Obviously, for a human ear, the sound that you could hear on Monday, on Tuesday will be more or less the same, even if it is not. But it's a way for me to kind of to work on what is time and space, the concept of space and time.
What about you, George?
Well, I must say we have very similar stories. I work with algorithms on a daily basis. I program every day. And of course, I do also generative music. And the reasons why I do it are the same with you, because I'd like to be surprised somehow by the machines. Because I would like to point out that algorithms in music are very old, actually.
Yes.
I mean, for what I can recall, the first algorithms were written in the 1700s by kind of Athanasius Kircher with the Musica Universalis, which was inspired by Jewish gematria, which means by the Jewish permutation of letters, to create permutational music, permutated music. And you can find this in Mozart's work when he was young, doing the work for Dices, for example. But Kircher was a real precursor of algorithms. And I would like also to say that music has a special relationship with technology which no other art have, because electronic music was born right out of scientific instruments. And so it's pretty natural that electronic musicians sooner or later start to handle scientific instruments, scientific notions. Also because, of course, if you look at the Middle Ages, the quadrivium, music was alongside with mathematics, astronomy, and geometry, because it's all the same. I mean, it's time and space, and time and space in different declinations, but it's always very close matter. So to go in specific, I work with my DNA, with my genome, and also with radioactivity. So I work with nuclear waste materials and radioisotopes, so to speak, and I've written algorithms to modify gamma spectrometers, which are a special analyzer of radioactivity that analyze the energies. You know, the Geiger counter tells you how many clicks, so how many activity you have from a specific material, but it doesn't tell you what material it is. Instead, there are other technologies called spectrometers that analyze the energy of the particles, so they see the frequency of the photons, and then you can find a fingerprint of a cesium-137 or strontium-90 or whatever. So on one side, I use radioactivity, and I study radioactivity, and I sonify radioactivity. And on the other side, I study my DNA and code it into music. I create a neologism for this, which is phonosomes. The phonosomic, the phonosomes are an algorithm to translate in one way my DNA into a piece of sounds, which is generative, of course. And then the twist is to mutate myself, my DNA, with radioactivity. But I use radioactivity not in a political or ecological way, but just as a game changer, something that mutates, that creates the mutation. All around us, there is a lot of radioactivity, and mutation happens in our body on a daily basis. And I just use radioactivity as an enhancer and as a human artifact, because it's totally, many radioisotopes are totally human-made, and they are a symbol of this anthropocenic age we live in. So my work is about change, and I decided to take my big data, which is the DNA, which is one of the most sought after data in the world, because a lot of company wants your data, wants your DNA. If you look at the prices of DNA analysis on Facebook, they are very low, they are very cheap because they want it, okay? And I decided to take my data and to modify it, to create mutations of this data.
Yeah, that's incredible.
So that's why I need to use algorithms, because I need to create a word of translation. It's a work of translation.
Yeah, and I guess that's also part of the really the Zeitgeist in the bad and the good sense, and at the same time, obviously, the fact that there is this tendency, and in art as well, of course, of pushing the threshold, the limits of this transduction, because I don't believe it's a translation; it's something else, right? Obviously, and then, but so there is in a way, and here you can see, if you want, also the corporate zeitgeist. We want to capture everything through algorithms, but then in your practices, I can sense, even in yours, despite what you said, playing the devil advocate, that of course you're doing it for change.
Yeah,
and your work is political. What you said to me, it's extremely political.
Absolutely,
taking ownership of your own data, mutating your own data, transduction that are not there, that are you inventing, this is all based on differences.
It's
producing differences.
It's an autarkic statement.
Completely.
Absolutely. And that's why I totally appreciated what you said. We have to get back our data, get back the big data. But that means that we need to be educated on computers. If we avoid algorithms like strange entities that we don't know, we will never have power in it. We must learn the alphabet to speak, to write. Yeah. So we need the most critical borders nowadays, for me, in my point of view, are the nations who are not able to get on the internet and to make computing. That's the most critical problem, because the big differences in the future world will be those who have access and those who don't. But then those who can tackle, those who can modify.
But that's also difficult, right? Because then again, it's a little bit the binary, what you said, but at the same time, isn't the privilege in the future the fact of being disconnected? And isn't being disconnecting eventually empowering, right? Because then my data are not tracked. Only the rich are going to be able to be offline,
The point is that whether you can choose or not.
Maybe in the future you will not be able to choose if you're online or not. And if you will have to face the data.
Yeah, only the rich people are going to be able to choose if to be online or not, because you're going to be hooked immediately, right?
Probably,
from your DNA and stuff like that.
Yes.
And so in that sense, being offline would be a privilege, would be a way of resisting in a way, right? And fucking the patterns, recognition of whatever system
I'm talking about being literate about the language.
I would actually say that even before that, because we're in a world which is made of images, we have very little knowledge on how to read images. And this... about the education, algorithms, computational devices, whatever, but we are still so far away, because we were talking about identity, and this world we are looking at, we look at it. We talk about things we see. We don't talk anymore about things we read, maybe not the majority. So there's not really a culture of how to see an image. and how that relates to you. So imagine how
But
many
on
things.
the
There's not
same
even a
time, we
culture
are-
to see algorithms, right? I mean,
but-
that's
Yeah,
even,
but
there's no
exactly.
culture of seeing, because
It's both.
more and more invisible, if you want.
But
And
on
they're
the same
invisible.
time, we are a society which is now driven by images.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying, because you're saying we need to be educated. And I say I would take one step back and say we should actually be educated about images. And before
need the
saying
Greeks.
how, yeah.
But I would say, I mean, why images? I would say really, I mean, what's lacking is education on algorithms. I mean, I would say we are almost stepping out of, I mean, images are these glitterish, like mirage that's just there to track data, to convey materials for algorithms. So it's a little bit of a, non so come si dice, specchio per le allodole.
But
It's not really the focus. I don't think it's images anymore. I think there is alphabetization towards images up to now, a little bit more at least than in the past. There's no alphabetization on algorithms. And why? Because algorithms are becoming more and more invisible. Why? Because interface, the distance, I finished this, the distance between body and interface is shrinking. Algorithms, and your work is pointing towards that. I mean, algorithms are getting into the body, and if the body is not algorithmic, the way you were saying, it's becoming algorithmic because of this violence.
We will
right?
become cybernetics in a matter of few years, and you will not even realize it, because it will start with nanomedicines, with nanotechnology that will cure cancer, cure. But it's a process, I think, in my point of view, that we cannot avoid, because we are on that path. And unless we destroy ourselves with a nuclear war, we are going to be half digital, half biological, for sure, in a matter of few decades, maybe 100 years.
Yeah. And nobody, I think, here is somehow
So that's
preventive.
why I'm very interested. For example, the most interesting music scene I've seen, it's not in Europe, because in Europe we have too much money, too much technology, and for this absurd reason, the ones who have more money and technology buy 40 years old technology like modular synthesizer to make music. They don't use computers. But in places like Argentina or Mexico, where the monies do not flow like in Europe, they use computers and Linux, and they do biohacking. They do incredible hacking of themselves using digital technology. And that's for me the very interesting thing that turned me on about modifying my DNA, changing my big data.
Yeah.
That's we have too many commodities. That's one of the biggest
And
problems.
that's also to connect it back to the Middle East, and then guys, maybe. And I was thinking maybe it would be very nice to listen something, and maybe this would be a nice way to close this little conversation. If you guys have something online, maybe we can put it up, and then at some point. But I would like to say
But we are offline.
we are completely offline.
We are disconnected.
We
Yeah.
are totally offline.
We are
Do you
in
have
the
anything on your
bunker.
computer? I mean.
Not disclosable right now.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well,
I'm
I see.
going to make these expositions with the JRC, and in Brussels with this installation with my DNA and nuclear stuff in October.
This is new stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
okay,
it's
yeah.
so it's still quite secret, but. I don't know if you guys have something else.
No, we can close on this, but I think it would be nice to close on a note that is somehow it's a bit of a concern of mine, because seeing all this incredible work and seeing also the references that you're talking about when it comes to biohacking in a less developed country, whatever it means, less developed, right? Or if we think about, for
Less
example,
rich.
let's say less rich, or if we think about what happened in the Middle East and the ways that technology has been used there, and immediately this moment of diversification in using technologies, as much as the moment of diversification that you guys as artists are able to produce with algorithms, how much this incredibly rich variety is immediately subsumed by algorithmic governance itself, right?
Well,
and then turn into metabolize, and then turn against the revolution in the Middle East, against the experimentation that artists has been doing to promote diversity, and then boom, and then I think it's
in a globalized world with this technology, we face one huge problem, which is background noise. Whenever the network is big, the noise gets higher. So it's very difficult. I mean, you can do, probably we have a Michelangelo living right now somewhere in the world.
I think there are many.
Many,
Probably
right?
there are
Yeah,
many,
exactly.
Leonardo, okay? But we don't see them because everybody is shouting. Everybody is making noise. So we are not really under control. We have created something which is totally not under control. And I would like to ask you one single question. Are you optimistic or negative about the future and algorithms?
That's a good point.
I have
Donatello,
the
that's a difficult question.
skepticism of the reason and the optimism of the will. This is Antonio Gramsci.
That's pretty neat.
Ottimismo della volontà, scetticismo della ragione. Yeah, this is
Fantastic, fantastic. Yeah. What
Yeah.
about you then? I mean, are you optimistic or
What
not?
could you say after Gramsci? After
I have a quote as well. Let me take a note. I mean, I have a good one as well. I mean,
I was about to say, yeah, thank you for the passing me the right now.
no, because then there is also. Oh, yeah.
I would say something
Yeah.
really simple, that in my everyday work, I produce, and this is for money, because even if we're in the rich part of the world, I do not belong in the rich part of the city, probably. But I produce algorithms every day to make images. And I was teaching recently to some kids about 11, 12, 13, 14, something like that. And I saw that everything they talked about was images. How they communicated was through images. Their mobile phones had image. The music they talked about, and I was doing something regarding music, was through images. And even if they don't, I mean, everything was, it was an image. Everything was related to images. And that's when I thought, we should really reinstate a sort of education of what time is in an image, what is in a film, in a movie, in a video. I mean, everything is through this. So, as a reaction, I started painting again. Because I actually do a lot of stuff with the algorithms also in video and real time, but then I thought, no, I don't want to do this anymore. And I had a huge project that I had to close because as a reaction, and I said I was reactionary, let's say, in this way, and I said, no, I will actually continue painting. I want something which is not.
And that's interesting, and that's a tendency, peculiar one. I mean, which is it's a return to the body, right? It's a paradoxical return to the body, return to materiality, right?
Yes.
And also in theory, there's a lot of work done in that sense, and Donatello. And then I have a quotation then. Please,
also that the fact is, if I do a painting, I'm not going to put it online. It's a different thing. So
it has to be offline, completely.
It's offline, plus it's only viewable by who has the painting. There's not anything much local than this, more local than this.
We are back to the locality issue. Yeah.
See,
and then the locality to me, and I want to quote Rainer Maria Rilke, which is a quotation that in reality I'm using from Bifo, which is a friend, and I'm sharing quite a bit with him since a few years. And I don't remember exactly, and I don't have internet to check it properly, but it was saying something like, it's a piece of poetry, and it was saying something where when the inevitable is in front of us and it seems nothing, you can't do anything, which in a way it's a little bit the situation that we are currently living. The unpredictable happen. Always. And the unpredictable, I'd say, and I hope, I mean, whatever you want, I mean, this is going to restart everything from the beginning in a way. It's a sort of loop. The unpredictable is really what the algorithms itself as well cannot catch right now, and wouldn't matter how many data you are in control of. The unpredictable would always happen, and as such, it would in a way it would produce what beautifully Guattari called the right to singularity, right? The right to be singular, which is the right to be local eventually. And again, I don't believe that algorithms at the moment are capable to do so for many reasons. Some of them we have been talking about, and. Maybe this. So optimism. I think that Rilke and Gramsci did the job for us. I mean,
I invite you guys. I mean, I'm not optimistic.
You are totally nihilistic.
No, nihilistic. But I mean, I've been listening to people which have places in jobs in critical places of the government, and they don't know what's gonna be like. They don't know what's gonna happen. And I fear that the power will always have the winning game. So I'm not very optimistic, because we were told that science would help man to have a better life. And this is only partly true. We are using technology to make life worse, much, much worse than Orwell thought. I mean, 1984 is a joke today.
No, of course.
It's a real joke. So I'm not very optimistic. I'm kind of negative. If we don't end up with a nuclear war in the next 25 years, which could happen, actually.
In fact, Gramsci said optimism of the will, and pessimism of the reason.
Yeah, that's why.
Which is a difference. But anyway,
but really, the uncomputable. It's the scary, if you want, part, right? Because in this sense, I mean, you see with the ecological disaster, with the Anthropocene, with the global warming, right? I mean, we are not capable of predicting enough with all these things. And beautiful algorithms we're talking about. We are not able to compute these problems.
We are not meant to.
There's not enough computer
it's not
power,
in our
right? I mean,
DNA
right?
to de-evolve. I mean, to expansion and crescita. I don't know.
Growth.
Growth. It's just in our DNA. We are meant to do that. So it's very difficult that we will deal efficiently with global warming, because we are not meant to do it. So that's a checkmate, of course.
Yeah, but Bookchin doesn't really agree with you.
What do you mean we are not meant to do it? Yeah, I mean,
degrowth.
Degrowth, okay, very
Yeah,
of course.
This reopens a whole.
He's open everything.
This opens
I mean,
a black hole.
growth. You just touched upon growth versus degrowth, which is
I don't
huge.
believe in the growth, but he, of course, have his point of view, and there are many good words about it, but I don't believe we are meant to step back.
Yeah. In any case, I would like to believe into the uncomputability of the biological, and the fact that this uncomputability can possibly create the unpredictable moment that's going to save us from the inevitable moments, right?
I think
and we can engineer that. And I want to say, we need at the moment, the only way out, we cannot leave that to biology. We need to use technology, because it's too late, right?
Guys, and then
of course. Yeah.
What if I tell you, if you make your DNA analyzed tomorrow, everybody do it. We could cure incredible diseases like this. Would you do it?
Yeah, but then of course
No.
that's the part. But I mean,
I won't do it.
You wouldn't do it, right?
No.
The thing is, you will not have a chance to choose, right? In a way,
Well,
this is going to happen. I agree.
You
would
have
have the chance to
today.
choose about the policies behind this process, right? Okay,
Yeah.
yes, let's do it because we have these advantages. Well, it happened already in China. They removed this factor,
in
and
the
then,
West they are
right?
kind of
you're the story of
saying, putting the ethics before
Yes.
everything, but
in China they're doing
again,
it.
In China,
a lot of diseases will be cured. So
Yeah, but then it's about data policies, I mean, right? Okay, let's use the data in this way. They are encrypted. They can only be used in certain, like all this kind of things.
it's like the atomic bomb. But once it's open, it's open. Once you open the Pandora's box, it's open.
And you can't control it. You
cannot
right?
control
Yeah,
it.
and we are already in this phase right now, right? Yeah, but can we steer it? I mean, that's the question, right? Can we,
I think that we can
as
steer
artists,
it.
as theoreticians,
I feel myself, and I think he does too, a little bit an hacker of music, and we hack computers to make stuff, and we know how to crack systems, how to create crises in the systems. So that's why being literate about algorithms is important. I mean, pretty much like being literate about Greek history.
Yeah, I actually did a course on how to dismantle a bomb.
Yeah.
for a job I did. So that's cool.
I'm doing nuclear waste management.
Fantastic.
So that could be useful sometime.
And then let me finish them, because I was just trying to find, and maybe this is now. Then maybe it seems that it might be interesting, and I mean, we are not saying that or doing. I mean, it's a bit of an approach, and looking at when or pushing the limits towards which algorithms are failing. Pushing the algorithm towards failing is a way to understand algorithms better and to possibly use them to create something different, and in a way steering the Pandora door, which is anyway already open and it's exploding right in front of us. I mean, maybe, because it seems that you guys are pushing these thresholds, right? I mean,
I don't
when
think
the algorithm fails,
there's a perfect algorithm anywhere. I mean, it's only God that's perfect. You will be told by a religious man. I think that computers fails every day, in many times, and we fail too, the same way. And there's no. One of the most dangerous things is to create something perfect. So perfect societies, worst scenarios we had in history. So we don't have to look for perfect, but we have to look for be able to control it some way on a personal level.
Yeah, on a local level, if you want, and towards diversification, towards bifurcation.
Diversification is part of our nature.
Yes, but not of algorithms, and then we're back to the technological use.
Depends
if you
by
want.
the algorithm. Actually, it depends by the algorithm, because the one he writes creates diversification.
Exactly.
They are designed to create diversification.
We actually desire that this happens.
Exactly.
It's within our will and our desire to make this happen.
Yeah. So it's possible. You guys doing it. The only problem is that the system is really trying to metabolize these fantastic experiments, and it's succeeding. And yet there is always something that escapes.
But there are
right?
a lot of data which are available, which is very interesting. The DNA that you don't want to give right now, it is available for scientists
In his laptop.
Already now.
Well,
You've been.
Anybody can look for genetic browsers, which can show you many interesting things. And that's what I'm doing with my genetic code. I have my pieces, and I can check with the genetic browsers what they are, those pieces, if I have some disease one day or not. But I have some control now on that data. It's not in some corporation. They have it at Jersey, of course, but they can do whatever they want, I told them.
So, reivindicating control of data, produce bifurcations, and pushing algorithms towards failure to invent new algorithms that eventually implement diversity. Don't reply, so we have a close.
At least being active.
I'm trying.
At least being active and not just subjects.
Right. Thank you, guys. I mean, it was fantastic meeting you.
Thank you.
Thanks to you.
And yes, I'm not sure how we're gonna be able to get out.
We should get out of the bunker. Please get us out.
I think we are locked in. I mean,
Get us out of the bunker.
Yeah, it was nice. I mean, let's
Super.
fantastic. Yeah. Thank you then. All right, but